Imagine for a moment that you're laying on the operating table and you're replacing every one of your neurons with microchips. And when you're doing that, it changes you. But how does it change you?
Steve, we need to talk.
Okay, so you're telling me that I'm completely misunderstanding the whole point of this topic.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I think there's a couple of things to touch on. First off, I think it's really important to introduce our guest here today, the one and only Shitbag exclusive, Gideon. How's it going, G?
How you doing? I'm a real shitbag.
Very good.
Excited to be here.
Fantastic.
Yep, and of course I am Nate, and that is
Meader.
And we're here to talk about philosophical quandaries today, such as the one teased by Steve at the beginning of the show.
But apparently wrong. Could you do me a favor and kind of explain it to me for the fourth time so I actually understand it?
The fourth time? Okay. Just give me a second. What am I explaining again?
Okay, so you were saying that there's a philosophical question. To me, it sounds kind of sci-fi, but like if you could create a synthetic neuron that worked exactly the same as the neurons in your brain, and someone was to cut said person's head open and replace each neuron one at a time with a synthetic neuron, how would that affect you, your conscience? How would that affect you? Are you still a human being? Etc. All of the various questions that this could pose. Is that more accurate?
Yeah. And part of the primary question is, if you were to do this, would you be the same you, consciously? So would you die consciously? Because it's a gradual process, so that's the main thing with the thought experiment. So would it be the same you that gets transferred over into there? I mean, that's the main question, in my mind at least.
No, I definitely think that's a good question, and it's a great place to start. Now, have you given this much thought yourself, Nathan?
I've tried to, but just completely failed on many accounts. Has you ever heard of this before?
I've talked about stuff that's similar. I think the real question here is that is there something special about organic material that creates consciousness versus synthetic material? And it also goes to the idea that could a computer or something synthetic ever have consciousness, and the idea that we have of it?
My fear is that we need to start with some definitions of what exactly is consciousness, because I feel that that's where I'm going to lack the most is when you say consciousness, what exactly do you mean?
So, in this instance, consciousness would be a particular instance of yourself. So, if we imagine, say, two twins, or actually, not even two twins, so let's imagine two different clones of someone. Those two clones are kind of the same genetically. They might even be the same, physically, but they're two different people. If you kill one, the other doesn't die. So, in this kind of instance, creating the synthetic brain wouldn't necessarily kill the you that everybody sees. You might behave, act, and do everything the same. But does your particular consciousness die? That's the question of consciousness that is laid out here.
So is that to say that at some point for your consciousness to die, would it need to stop? Would you need to stop being a conscious being at some point in order for you to die? Or in this instance, like, are you knocked out when they're replacing these neurons, and then after they replace each one, you're woken back up? Or is it all conscious? You're conscious the whole time?
So are you saying that you need to be conscious for the whole time in order for it to transfer over? So if you were asleep, let's say, that you would not have your consciousness transferred over?
I'm saying it would be an easier argument if there was a point where you were no longer actively conscious to say that your consciousness died, versus consciousness is like a stream from the way I imagine it. So if it's never stopped, then it would never be would never die. It would be like replacing a cell anywhere in your body. It's still you, even though you shed all of your old cells and completely replace them every, whatever the statistic is. Is it like 7 years or something?
I don't know. I'm still kind of hung up on the thought of consciousness, and I'm thinking a lot in terms of input and output, right? What distinguishes computer and synthetic from organic. And I know as far as our senses go, it's constant stream of input, output, right? But with computers, it needs a master, right? Whereas, and they're developing it past that sort of point with AI and such, right? But it still needs the input from some sort of outside source, some sort of intervention, still an organic mind. So as far as consciousness is concerned, is it just a matter of you don't need outside of a superior being like a god or something. You don't need some sort of input from another creature or another sentient being.
So there's a level of independence in your mind with the consciousness.
Exactly. I don't want to say free will exactly, but pragmatically, like how we think of free will.
I mean, would it be safe to say like a compatibilism definition of free will, where it's compatible with determinism?
Yes.
If we know what consciousness is, and let's say we have an understanding of it, and let's say it's possible for the AI to be created with consciousness, is it possible to create something that's more conscious than us, in a way? I mean, this is already assuming we know what consciousness is, which we obviously don't. But is it possible for us to create something that is conscious and more conscious than us? And for me, it's hard to think about, because evolution kind of created our consciousness, and that's just a kind of not random factor, but it's nothing intended in that. It's just a result of thousands and millions of years and billions of years.
Well, by saying that in itself, you're using the word more when you're explaining consciousness. So does that not imply that we're already at a level of consciousness that's more than something else? And how is that even possible?
I mean, I'd say certainly, like, look at the greater apes, right? They seem to display a sense of consciousness, but it's on a completely, or what we would think, a lower level than human beings.
Yeah, I would agree with Gideon on that. For instance, caterpillars have very little sense of awareness. Amoebas, even less sense. When you start getting into even octopi don't have a brain. They have a distributed central nervous system. And so it's like each part of their body is conscious of itself, but it's not conscious of the whole thing. So that gets into a very weird kind of topic and area where you can have something that behaves like it's consciously, but it's no actual kind of central kind of thing controlling itself. Whereas, these mammalian species, like such as us, we have a central hub, and we can see like that we are more conscious because we can actually kind of look at that central hub in detail.
Is a central hub absolutely necessary? Because I'm thinking something like a swarm of bees. Those can act. They're all acting independently, but they're all doing the same thing. And in a way, it seems like they're all being controlled by one master conscience,
like a hive mind.
Yeah, exactly.
It just came to me thinking of a little thought thing for input output. With sort of a higher level of consciousness, right? We could be trapped in a room with no windows, just all white wall, right? And we could still have a stream of thought and action. Whereas with that octopus, right, that the central nervous system it has is in response to direct intervention from the outside, whether it's a predator or prey, right? But say humans, right, we're trapped in that white room. You could run up the wall, do a wall flip. You could decide to do things all on your own without having any sort of suggestion. I guess idea of creativity.
So you're saying an input isn't necessary for humans to have consciousness.
Or in another way, to take another way, would you be saying that the input's kind of put on itself? So the input is its own brain in a way.
Exactly. Yeah. The input's exactly its own brain. It doesn't need it's coming up with its own actions, right? There's nothing stimulating or promoting anything you would do in that case in that room. Whereas, the octopus, I guess you fill it with water, but it's just going to swim around mindlessly. It's not going to ink or you wouldn't expect it to like try and eat something that's not there.
So what makes doing a wall flip more conscious than swimming around aimlessly?
Well, I suppose there's intent to your action.
Objective?
Right? Yeah. There's like objective intent there. As objective as that could be, but if you had a room full of viewers, and I suppose they would have to be conscious viewers, but they could acknowledge that there was intent in you doing that wall flip, whereas there doesn't seem to be rhyme or reason to an octopus, or even like in a fish tank. Right, there's no rhyme or reason to like how the fish really swim around until food is put in there.
To kind of flip that on its head for a second, with the case of, say, the sensory animal, say an octopus in this example, it's not that there's not a rhyme or reason, it's rather that it's really rather programmed, quite well to behave in a particular way. Whereas with the human, it's not programmed to behave in a particular way, and therefore it kind of doing a front flip or doing random things and within the wall is kind of not being programmed. It's you can describe it as creativity, but it's also kind of it's the lack of programming, or it's kind of the openness.
Yeah, I don't know if we've run that dry. I think another way to examine consciousness is contemplation of one's own existence. Does that make sense? Like it seems fairly obvious. Like octopi aren't really considering like why am I here? Or what has led me to be where I am right now. Whereas you do, we clearly see that in humans, and I'd say some greater apes.
Are you touching on the fact that they can recognize that they have a self and that they are a being able to take action on other things? Or it sounds kind of like you're taking a step further than that as well and saying, not just I am, but asking questions about why I am. It's sort of like it's sort of Cartesian, right? Like I think, therefore I am. But I'd say that's like a distinguishing factor of consciousness, right? The computer doesn't. You put in an input for it to do whatever task or whatever you want it to do, and it doesn't spit back, why do you want me to do this? Whereas, a human or an ape is going to provide some sort of resistance, humans more so.
Right. And I think I saw something on Reddit a while ago, and it was about caterpillars, and when they do the whole cocooning thing and they come out, they like wonder, what the fuck am I doing? They come out with, what the fuck am I? What the fuck happened? And I definitely think it's true that humans, we have those same kind of moments. Like, we go to our toilet, let's say 2 or 3 times a day, and we kind of defecate this kind of shit out of our body. But we know why we're doing it, right? It's not like, what the fuck am I doing? It's
Chipotle. That's why I do it.
There's very little we do that we're not confused by. Even like masturbation, for instance. We have this drive to reproduce, and this drive to reproduce is coming out in this kind of sexual kind of drive and this kind of feeling to kind of touch ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding why we're taking impulsive actions to you is adds on to the fact that the proof that we have a higher conscience than the caterpillar who is going into a cocoon and is just doing it impulsively without thought of why.
Right. Because there's the programming that we have, and it's not that the programming is bad. It's not that we don't act according to that programming, but rather it's that the programming, like, we know why we're programmed that way. We know
self-aware.
Yes, self-awareness.
And we have the capability of analyzing that, right, and studying it in scientific method and whatnot.
And changing it?
To an extent, right? That's sort of the point of psychology.
Just a complete side tangent, not on topic at all, but caterpillars going into cocoons are so cool because when they go into the cocoon, their body turns into liquid. When they're in a cocoon, they are 100% liquid, and then they reform as a butterfly and come out.
Are they full on liquid or are they like semi-solid?
They're full on liquid, no brain, no anything. They're a liquid, and then they reform as a fucking butterfly. That makes no sense, but it's amazing.
Like a DNA goop.
A primordial ooze. Absolutely. And it comes out a goddamn butterfly.
I mean, one question that I'd have about that, bringing it back to consciousness.
Damn you.
Would be, does the butterfly, let's say the butterfly was conscious, would it then kind of die because of that? Because, it's like, if you were to take my molecules and just kind of spread them all out across the room right now, and then you say, 10 minutes later, put them back together, even in the right way, that'd kill me, right?
So you're saying, does the caterpillar die when the butterfly is born?
Right. It's consciousness.
I mean, if it's turning to like full goop, I can't imagine that it has any, previous acknowledgement of being a caterpillar.
Does it have acknowledgement of being a caterpillar in the first place?
No, probably not, because, it's such a simple creature. But even so, like, the butterfly isn't like, oh boy, it's so fun to fly. Like, it never, at the point it's a butterfly, it never even knew what it was like to live without flying.
Just for the sake of argument, I gotta throw out there that we have no proof that the butterfly doesn't question why am I. We just know that we'll never know. So we have to assume based off of various assumptions that have to be made that it doesn't know.
I would agree with that on a epistemological level. Okay. So we can't have proof of that necessarily, but we can figure that it doesn't, most likely because of its brain is just not made for that kind of shit.
And at very least, for the sake of argument and conversation, we're going to make that assumption. That it doesn't question why it exists.
I hope that's the case, because that'd be kind of sad if it did.
Is that how you feel? Sad that you question why you exist?
I feel sad for the butterfly, because, what does the fucking news? It'll get fly around. I mean,
that's all. Okay.
Well, I mean, like, if you look at, what creatures start doing once they start gaining that level of consciousness, they seem to have a lot more autonomy, right? Mm-hmm. And, if it's able to contemplate its own existence, you have to think it has all the other higher reasoning skills. Right. I just don't see how like one could be like, be able to think like, why am I here, but not have the same sort of problem solving of like mathematics and whatnot.
So the argument there would be kind of an evolutionary argument. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So essentially, we have these problem solving skills because that was in our evolutionary history. A butterfly, what does it do that needs problem solving skills for?
Well, and clearly, if it had the problem-solving skills, it'd be a better survivor. I think most of it survives just sort of en masse, whereas, say, ape species sort of have like clever survival skills, right? Can outsmart their predators.
Don't be hating on the butterfly. It's probably been around longer than humans.
Oh yeah, but I mean, like it is at if humanity wanted to enslave butterflies, it wouldn't be very difficult.
So our power to enslave butterflies makes us more conscious.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And does that boil down to having power over other species?
Well, yeah, the butterflies aren't going to revolt.
That'd be scary.
Butterflies like the ultimate slaves. Yeah. They're not going to revolt. They're going to do all the work.
We're going to have a shit ton of beautiful flowers. We're going to pollinate the shit out of the fields.
Yeah.
Fuck the bee problem. Let's just enslave the butterflies.
Is there really a bee problem?
I haven't done any research on that, so I can't talk to it. Have you, Nathan?
I've done a little research just yesterday.
Are beekeepers bee enslavers?
Well, you would have to assume there that the bees have a consciousness and a will that you can subjugate. And as far as we can tell, they don't. It's like cows. Cows have a consciousness, but they're not very will-oriented.
Yeah, like I feel like if you can be herded, you don't really have a conscience. Like if your species is determined almost completely by groupthink and it has no way to escape that, like you don't see like one cow being like, oh no, I'm gonna stray from the pack. There's not. I mean, we have like cute stories like the black sheep, right? But that just doesn't happen in nature.
Have you ever seen a Black Friday mall opening? I'd say that's the ultimate groupthink and being able to be herded.
Yeah, but I mean, we have examples of us like staying behind, right? That for every person going to Black Friday and getting trampled, there's one staying at home being like, I'm not going into that shit. You know?
Right. Another way to put that maybe would be that the cows that did go outside the groupthink, that behaved on their own independently, they probably just died. The farmer didn't keep them around or slaughtered them just instantly.
Instant death.
Instantly. Like, he had a sniper rifle.
Brought down the wrath of God.
Where do you think you're going? Oh, boy. Pulling us back from the butterflies into this thought experiment that we started with, I think I kind of have a question, because I was thinking about, so if you're replacing it one neuron at a time, it seems like, at very least, G and I agree, and you might as well, that it seems pretty obvious there should be no difference. If the synthetic is exactly the same as the organic, there should be no difference thought-wise.
Yeah, I would pretty much agree with that. Just because organic life isn't special in any kind of way besides that it evolved. But, from a compound material, compound-wise, I can say that word, molecularly, what's special about organic molecules as opposed to non-organic?
I mean, I think the only real one is time, right? Mm-hmm. These organic molecules, they've sort of had millions of years to develop into the supercomputer they are, whereas, any one person only has a lifetime to develop any kind of synthetic material.
And I think going along the same idea of time is the degradation over time. So while organic material will be able to replicate itself and continue going on without anything else having to give it an input other than, basic food, drink, all of that, something synthetic would need to be manufactured to be replaced. It wouldn't be replaced on its own based off of its own interior coating. But with the ability to replace it, to physically replace it, versus an organic thing which has a natural termination date, you could live longer as long as you knew how to create your own brain.
Would a synthetic creature be able to keep itself alive by manually replacing its own neurons?
Well, there's actually an argument about viruses. And viruses are essentially computer programs that will kind of replicate themselves by going from PC to PC, and they kind of infect other PCs, hopefully, not hopefully, but unknowns to the user. And there's been some viruses programmed to kind of self-modify in some small degrees. So, in a way, we have a natural selection effect where the viruses will kind of sneak themselves into computers. The ones that do really well will kind of go to other computers, and the ones that don't will die off.
But I don't think that hits on the same point necessarily as something as deep as a human brain, like G was saying, being able to. Would you be able to perpetually keep yourself alive by replacing your own brain over time? Like, it's going to rust, or whatever the synthetic material is made of, over time it's going to degrade. That's just a fact. So it would need to be replaced. Could you replace your own, and in doing so keep yourself alive perpetually?
Oh, and I mean, like, the other questions that come into play are, what's the power source, right? Where the human body, or like the sodium pumps, right, that create electricity, would that be sufficient enough for the synthetic, or do they need a sort of alternate power source?
I imagine if we're to the point where we're replacing the brain, it's functioning in the same exact way as something biological, as something organic.
Exact same chemicals and everything?
I mean, something about it would have to be different to make it synthetic, like what it's made out of, but all of the properties of it would be the same, such as amount of power going into it, how it affects other things, etc.
Well, if you put it into this, guys, imagine you don't replace each part, but you put it into a computer program, per se. Let's say it's a computer program instead of like actual kind of a network there. I mean, there's no need to replace parts with a program. You just have to keep the computer running, right? So all you need is electricity and working parts for that computer, and you can actually transfer that program over to different computers if you wanted to. So that way it kind of takes out the kind of maintenance of actual physical components, and you just have to like make sure the program is there, and that's able to change itself in these kind of different ways.
Well, the program itself is still has physical parts to it. It still exists in a physical way, because you can run out of space on your computer or your iPhone because you don't have enough, whatever it's called, RAM or whatever. I'm very computer ignorant, so I'm sorry for that. So I'm going to say, but my point is, it does take up physical space. So there is a physical aspect to it. Even it's not just necessarily keeping the computer going. It does exist in a physical way.
Mm-hmm. But the point I was making is you don't really see the physical degradation with, say, a computer program. So if you have like a basic Hello World program with a computer, the text is there. The data doesn't die. And if you are transformed into data, you don't have to maintain the data. The data's already there. So you have to maintain the components that are composed of the data, but you don't have to maintain necessarily the data. So now we make books. Like, books are data comprised, right? And books can, have wear and tear. They can start smudging. The text might get a little fuzzy. But the data contained within that books are, very objective, very reasonable.
This gives me a sort of side thought. I can't remember where I heard it, but it's something to the effect of, part of what makes the human mind so creative is that it doesn't have a perfect representation of anything it's ever received, right? So even if you were trying to go out and do a math problem, it's still going through the steps. There's very few things that are memorized just by part, right? Your brain goes through however fast it does go through it, but specifically with like memories, right? You never have a memory that's exactly how it happened. And there's some, clearly, right, there's some part of that is productive, right, of not being able to recall things, right? So you notice these people who have like the incredible minds who can do long division to like 20 decimal places in flat seconds are usually pretty bad at math. They're incredible at calculation, but not so great at math. So would that sort of lack of degradation and decay affect the synthetic in some way? Whereas we draw a lot of creative advantages by not remembering things exactly as they were.
So in a way, that's kind of drawing a juxtaposition between, say, procedural kind of programming and non-procedural programming. So a computer has a very strict procedure it follows to determine, say, various things. So like a camera that can detect like faces has a very strict procedural algorithm there. Mm-hmm. We don't necessarily have a strict procedural algorithm. So if we see something that looks like a face, we try to figure out if it is the face. And if we eventually find out it is a face or isn't a face, that gets updated into our brains, and we can kind of play around with that.
Yeah, there's tons of like cross-referencing that has to go on, right? It travels down probably an infinite amount of wrong paths before you might reach the right path, right? Whereas the computer is going to go straight to the right path. It's like, oh, I know exactly what this is, or I know what this input is. Else error.
So when you say right path, you don't necessarily mean the right path, like correct, philosophically in a way, not objectively correct, but the right path. The computer will be, very happy to say this is the solution to the problem, right?
Exactly.
But it doesn't know whether the solution is correct or not. Mm-hmm. We're definitely gonna cover more, perhaps not about philosophy. But next time, you'll find out what it is on We Need to Talk.